Today, in a special meeting to commemorate the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. The inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, as defined by the General Assembly, are the right of Palestine refugees to return to their homes and property from which they had been displaced and uprooted. This year's observance takes on particular significance in view of its convergence with the 60th anniversary of the dispossession of the Palestinian refugees. 6 decades later, Palestinian refugees have still not been able to return to their homes. 60 long years have elapsed since hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees were compelled to leave their homes.
A large segment of the Palestinian people forced to live for over 60 years in refugee camps, a durable solution to the Palestine refugee problem and to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict could only be achieved in the context of their inalienable right of return to the homes and property from which they had been displaced. The right of return did not diminish with the passage of time and remained fully applicable to the Palestine refugees.
I convey to all of you appreciation for your participation in the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people in their legitimate struggle. Our people continue to endure excruciating pain and unbearable suffering. Brutal practices and measures deny them from their human rights. The occupying power also continues to carry out its brutal and inhumane policies, extrajudicial assassinations, killing the children of our people. In regard to Jerusalem, the occupying power is doing all it can to Judaize the city by measures suffocating the population. All such practices endanger the character of the city as an Arab, Islamic, and Christian city.
This day is usually observed on the 29th of November, which is the date in 1947 when the General Assembly adopted Resolution 181, partitioning historic Palestine into 2 states, one Arab and one Jewish, and led to the tragedy and injustice that befell the Palestinian people with their uprooting, dispersion, dispossession, and loss of their homeland in the Nakba, or catastrophe, of 1948. The pressing need to resolve the Palestinian question, for it is at the center of widely held perceptions among nations on the lack of justice, equality, and respect for human rights in our world, as well as the tensions and sensitivities among religions and between the East and the West. Israel, the occupying power, continues to inflict immense losses and humanitarian suffering.
60 long years ago, 60 long years have passed since the Palestinian territories have been occupied. Innocent Palestinians have been driven out of their homeland. Their lives and livelihoods have been torn apart, and these vicious Zionist policies and practices have brought about continuous misery, death, and suffering to defenseless Palestinian men, women, and children. Throughout all these years, Palestinians have been subjected to various kinds of Israeli crimes and atrocities, including inter alia massacres, collective punishments, and deprivation. It is a common knowledge now that nearly all the detainees, in particular children, had been subjected to torture, humiliation, abuse, and beating by Israelis during detention. The Zionist regime has continued and increased its violation of the most basic rights of the Palestinian people. As a result, Palestinians are enduring an unprecedented and intolerable level of suffering.
It is our moral duty to celebrate the Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, which is the 60th anniversary of Nakba, to remember what happened. The leaders of Zionism knew that it was impossible to achieve their project unless they get rid of the Palestinians. Hence came transfer, which is the main part of their methodology. This is mentioned in the concept of transfer in the Zionist planning. This policy was known as Talit Plan, pursued by the Supreme Zionist leadership to control the largest area of the Palestinian land, evicting the Palestinians, destroying their villages in a manner known by the international community now as ethnic cleansing. The ethnic cleansing of Palestine. The decisive weapon used was terrorization and organized massacres. The outcome of the Nakba led to the destruction of 416 villages totally, and Israel's seizure of 78% of the historic land of Palestine after the partition resolution gave the Jewish state 55%. The tragedy of the Palestinian people did not end with the 1948 Nakba. It is a continuous tragedy. The Israeli army continued its incursions and intensive raid and air attacks on the pretext of responding to the rockets launching therefrom. When will the Palestinian refugees and Palestinian people will have the right given back to them, as well as apologies given back to them because of the Nakba?